Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our fairly unscheduled webinar. I'm Dr. Meredith Warner of Warner Orthopedics and Wellness and also founder of the Well Theory. And today I wanted to talk about peptides. I felt compelled to give this talk for a couple of reasons. I've titled it, Why Is There So Much Hype? I am consistently being asked by my patients for these things, and I'm going to tell you why I've been reluctant to offer them, and in fact won't. I'm going to tell you what the history is of these things, what the studies show. I'm going to talk about the regulation, the regulatory environment, the actual rules, because you've probably been fed a load of bunk from various people. And then give you tools should you still wish to do this so that you can make your own decision and be economical about it. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Warner Orthopedics and Wellness and Well Theory webinar series. This is free education I do just because I like to teach, because I come from a long line of teachers. It's in my blood. What can I say? All right.
Deb says good morning.
Landy
says good morning.
Landy or Mandy?
Landy.
Landy and Deb, good morning. All right. What a better way to spend a Saturday morning than having a lecture about peptides? That's all I'm saying. Okay, I started this talk with a screenshot that somebody posted on X on their cell phone. The first guy, Atlas, says, something I've learned over this long weekend in San Francisco is that the elites all have a Chinese peptide dealer. Then the next guy, Lime, replies, my San Francisco roofing contractor has a peptide guy. This is how prevalent this has become. Everybody has a peptide guy and everybody's taking peptides. Okay, how did this happen? Well, we have all been living through massive changes, rapid changes in everything in society. And I want to say it started probably in 2008 with the advent of Google and then later Facebook, and then COVID happened. And now we have a perfect storm. What do I mean? Well, during COVID, rules for telehealth platforms were massively relaxed. There used to be a lot more rules about providing medical care, even pseudo-medical care across state lines. Since COVID, all of those rules have been relaxed, and you've seen the advent and growth of massive telehealth platforms like Roe, like Hims and Hers, and a variety of others. Some of them have been shut down, like Cerebras got in trouble. Another one called Dope got in trouble. They were peddling Adderall and things like that, like it was going out of style. Notice the diagnosis numbers skyrocketed after COVID with the advent of these telehealth platforms. So the FDA didn't really have oversight over all of this and over the prescribing of these platforms at the time. And it's unclear if the FTC does. Nobody knows who's regulating these corporate entities that aren't physicians, that aren't pharmaceutical companies. They're just marketing companies that are selling products. So they're kind of like outside of the bounds of the different regulatory regimes. It's not clear. Well, when you have that vagueness in the tech world, that is time to pounce and make some money. How they work is they get a mid-level prescriber in each state. In other words, not an MD, not a DO. They get a nurse practitioner or a PA, something like that, hire them, send them, links to clients, and they have to sign scripts, or they're asked to sign, or they're supposed to use their clinical judgment to sign scripts on a daily basis, every 20 minutes or every 15 minutes or every 10 minutes or whatever it is. The reason they hire a prescriber in each state is so they don't violate state practice of medicine laws, right? So they get a mid-level who prescribes whatever, the Viagra, the Ozempic, the Adderall, and now the peptides, okay? Now, the part that you may or may not know is that the FDA has banned most peptides in this country as what are called Category 2 bulk drugs. In other words, they are deemed not safe for humans. Once they're banned, they become research only. In other words, not for human use, intended for research only. Most of these things are going to have that in very, very tiny script on the bottle or the vial or whatever, however you get it. That has become the norm. And once it's research only, guess what? You don't need a physician anymore because the physicians are not allowed to prescribe this. It's now research only. So you don't need a physician. You just need an influencer. So now we roll in the celebrity influencers that work with these telehealth platforms, and they can recommend it. The platforms orders it and they ship it directly to you, and you self-inject. That's what has happened since about 2020 in this world. There's no risk to the influencers. They don't have a license to lose or anything. They're just being paid to tell you it's awesome. There's no worry about losing licenses from anybody else, because remember, I told you it's a light regulatory regime because nobody knows who's in charge. And then because it's research only, it's an FDA banned substance. You don't have to have any research to back this up. You don't have to have any outcomes data. You don't have to have any safety data. It's not for human use. You don't have to have anything to support it. All you need is an influencer saying it worked for them. So I think we have a perfect storm here.
Awesome. People are piling in. Jackie says hi.
Hey, Jackie. Brett. All right, so we just discussed how this hype started. We have a perfect storm of light regulation, big, actually they are international telehealth platforms, circumventing loopholes, and research-only substances, which means you don't have to have any outcomes data. So I call this the secret sauce to selling a substance. You have to have the substance to be banned for legitimate manufacturers. You have to have the substance to be not fully illegal like heroin or fentanyl, but not really legal either. The substance should be easily obtained from cheap manufacturers in China. The substance should have a mystique based on a legitimate substance. So it should ride the tail feathers of something that's been studied and is legit and is awesome, such as the GLP-1s. The substance should be able to avoid any reporting of adverse events whatsoever. And there should be no oversight of the substance because it's a banned substance. Therefore, no one is going to regulate it because it's banned. So you have a research-only banned substance with no regulation. This is the secret sauce to selling a substance. It is genius.
Beryl, my favorite orthopedic doctor.
Oh, thank you, Beryl. All right, here's some peptides you may have heard of and some you may not have. I'm sure everybody's heard of tirzepatide, semaglutide, and you will soon hear of, and I have so much trouble saying these words, retatrutide. So what is that? Mounjaro, Ozempic, and I don't think that Lilly has named the triple agonist they're about to release. It's in phase 3 clinical studies right now, but it's going to be mind-blowingly good at weight loss. You've probably heard of BPC-157. I'm going to talk about that in detail later. TB500, which used to be called thymosin beta-4 fragment. It's a fragment of that. It's for injury recovery. You may have heard of GHKCU, which is a copper-based peptide used for skin care and injectable for collagen growth. CJC1295 and ipamorelin. These are growth hormone upregulating things. Samorelin, which is a long established and used stimulator to stimulate growth hormone release. AOD 9604, CagriSema, the list goes on and on. So basically, all of these ones that are a bunch of numbers and weird like symbols as names are riding the coattails of the ones that have been studied and made all of this seem legitimate to everybody in the world. Your tirzepatide and your semaglutide. Hey, Jean. Okay, so what even is a peptide? All right, amino acids are the nitrogenous compounds that become proteins. So most life forms are carbon-based, carbon being ubiquitous and plentiful in the universe. Then there's nitrogen, also ubiquitous and plentiful. So proteins are made of nitrogen. So anything that has nitrogen in it is going to be an amino-based or protein-based product. These are small organic molecules. They have a central carbon that's attached to the nitrogen group or the amino group. And there's a side chain that is unique per amino acid. There's about 20, 21 of them. A few are essential, a few are non-essential, okay? Some we can get in our diet only, some we can make ourselves. But you basically need these amino acids to make the proteins because most of what you think of yourself as you, the physical structures that you are built on amino acids, okay? Each configuration of these little central carbons with the nitrogen group become a unique amino acid. Proteins are the structural elements of your body. And there's some you may have heard of. So glutathione is a tripeptide. Carnosine is a dipeptide. And peptides are effectively just shorter chains of amino acids than is a protein. A protein, the cutoff is generally at about 51 amino acids. Bigger than that is a protein. Smaller than that is a peptide. Insulin is a 51 amino acid peptide. So insulin itself is a peptide. So there are some really good peptides that are used as drugs that we've all heard about, that have been studied extensively. And all of these other peptides are riding that wave. Okay, so if you have more than one amino acid, if you just have two amino acids, you're a peptide. Remember, I just told you carnosine is a peptide. I think it's beta-alanine and L-histidine. A peptide bond forms. This is a covalent amide bond, so they're sharing electrons and staying connected that way. And then the carboxyl group of one amino acid will react with the amino group of the next, release a water molecule, they link up, and so on and so forth. You can have a group of linear peptides. They can form a circle or be cyclic. There's a variety of different ways that nature puts these things together, but that's basically all it is. 2 or more amino acids, but less than 51. Oh. This one? Put both on my jacket. Sorry. We always seem to have technical difficulties. That's what happens when you're a mom and pop shop. All right. Okay, how do you make these in your body? Well, ribosomal synthesis, which is really kind of how we do everything. The DNA, okay, so your genetic code signals the RNA, which then signals ribosomes. Ribosomes are like the little tiny factories in your cells that produce proteins. So the DNA makes a signal to the RNA. The RNA goes to the ribosome. It gets transcribed, that signal. Then the ribosome basically just puts these amino acids together. They assemble the amino acids in the exact order that the code tells them to do so. And then if the body has made a really large one, it may have a signal to produce an enzyme that'll chop that up into smaller pieces to make the amino acids that are necessary for whatever given process is going on. This is all finely tuned. This is very elegant. This is all dependent on very sensitive feedback loops in the body, and everything interacts with everything else at all times. Okay, so why would anyone in their right mind take a research-only peptide ordered from China and inject it themselves? Well, we've been led to believe, and it's true in a lot of cases, that they serve many purposes in our body. Therefore, we believe that it must be good for us. So there's hormones, neurotransmitters, neuromodulators, antimicrobials, things that help with growth and repair, enzyme inhibition, toxin control, and number one reason people do crazy things, cosmetics, okay? Anytime somebody thinks something's going to make them look better, they will go to the ends of the earth to do it. It doesn't matter how crazy or awful it sounds. They're just still going to do it. So that's the number one way to sell a substance, is to say it's going to, give you hair growth on your head, make you thinner, make your skin less wrinkled, make you glow, whatever. And then they're bioactive peptides, okay? We know this works because we've seen it work with Ozempic and Mounjaro. So we know these peptides are very bioactive. Short to medium chain, so they're not too big, they're not too small, and they're designed to mimic natural pathways in the body. These are all made by solid phase synthesis in a laboratory. Okay, I'm going to talk about that later. Usually they're administered by injection because if you take them orally, most of them are totally destroyed and just broken up into the constituent amino acids in the gut. So to get the peptide, you inject it. That's why it's taken so long to come out with oral formulations for Wegovy and Eli Lilly's drugs, because it's hard to get past that system of destruction in the stomach, okay? Think of these as mini precision-coded chains of amino acids that we can use as a biological tool. And like I said, there is some legit research in this field, and these things are very, very powerful. I'm just going to tell you why the peptides that your peptide guy, that the roofer told you to use, or the gym guy, may or may not be a good idea for you. So the real reason most people are taking these things is influence. In 2022, a paper was released from the Journal of Health Communications that proved, and it was one paper, take it or leave it, but this study showed that celebrity endorsements work better than factual medical information to make you decide to buy something. If these companies thought that you really believe factual medical education, or doctors like me, that is how they would be advertising it, and they would be doing it in a much more, shall we say, professional manner. But they know better. They know the brain science. They know what works. So they know to get you to buy something, all they have to do is throw up an influencer. And that matters more to people than medical facts. generally speaking. And these celebrities are paid to influence you to buy these things. Now, you may or may not know, but a few years ago, it was made flat out illegal for doctors to receive even an ink pen from a sales rep because that might be perceived as undue influence. In other words, if the sales rep came to educate me about a new drug, let's say Mounjaro, and gave me a Mounjaro pen, that is illegal because that pen might influence me to prescribe more Mounjaro and tell more patients to take it. No such rules exist in the influencer world. They are flat out paid all the time to tell you what they take, what their health journey is, how it's helped them, et cetera. And there are no rules. They're allowed to do it because they're not physicians and they're not billing federal healthcare providers. They're taking cash payments. It's a research only illegal substance already. So there's no rules. So remember that. Your doctor can't take a pen from a drug company, but these guys get equity, cash, et cetera, perks, go on and on and on. I'm going to tell you more about that, how that all works in a few minutes here. Okay, we think peptides heal everything, right? That's what they tell you. Jennifer Aniston tells you that. Serena Williams tells you that. Charles Barkley's telling you that. The pretty boy is telling you that, okay? They're pleiotropic, meaning they can affect many tissues. The athletes and celebrities do it, therefore it must be okay. Now remember, McDonald's and Coca-Cola have used this for years and it works like a charm. You can get an athlete to say a Big Mac is a good thing, people are going to eat a Big Mac. Now, do you think the athlete's eating the Big Macs? Maybe, maybe not. But they're telling you they're awesome. Same thing with sugared beverages. Right now, there's massive disenchantment with the medical industry. I have disenchantment with the medical industry. I get it. So this is like a fertile ground for these celebrity influencers. And then on top of that, we now finally have a big push for wellness. So people are starting to take care of themselves, which, as you know, I've been preaching for at least a decade now. So the athletes and celebrities are riding the bandwagon, a disenchantment with the medical community, the wellness push, and they're being paid a lot to tell you this stuff is awesome. So why are there so many influencers or wannabe influencers talking about this? Well, I say to myself, why not? If you were an influencer, why wouldn't you be pushing this stuff and getting paid? GLP-1s made this industry shine. They proved that a peptide could work really, really well. I mean, people are losing 20% of their body weight. The newer studies are showing 30% body weight loss. So biohackers, wellness folks, anti-aging community, they all jumped on board. And then they realized, wait, more money is to be made here. This is my personal opinion, by the way. Okay, importantly, and this is one of the key factors in how this has all come about. When the GLP-1s were introduced, there was a shortage of the drug, okay? There was so much demand for Ozempic that the company could not make enough to meet the demand. When there is a shortage, there is a loophole in the compounding laws that says compounding pharmacies are allowed to copy a patented substance, a patented drug, if there's a manufacturing shortage. Well, during COVID and shortly thereafter, the FDA said there was a shortage. So the compounding pharmacies were allowed to make effectively knockoff Wegovy, knockoff Ozempic, knockoff Mounjaro. It was legal. Well, then these companies upped their manufacturing capacity and they made it so they could meet the demand and there's no longer a shortage. The shortage rule was dropped, I don't know, a year or two ago. They said there was no longer a shortage. So at that point, compounding pharmacies were not supposed to be copying a patented drug, okay? And remember, I also told you the telehealth rules were all relaxed. So now we have compounding pharmacies that are making money hand over fist with the GLP-1s. More compounding pharmacies were spun up. A bunch got consolidated. They made friends or partnerships with the telehealth platforms. And now we have what we have, where every other ad on TV or on the internet is some rando telehealth company trying to sell you some drug or another, okay? The venture capital firms have found a holy grail here, a high margin product with low customer acquisition costs and recurring revenue. Subscriptions were required monthly. You couldn't get this drug without the mid-level that they owned giving you a prescription every month, okay? And now they don't even need the mid-level because it's research only. So this is genius. It's a high margin recurring revenue substance, and all it takes to get people to do it is get a few influencers to say it worked for them. Huge companies play this game. You've probably heard of them. Hims and Hers is one of the bigger ones. Now, when I made this talk, they were in the middle of this lawsuit. Novo Nordisk had sued them because they kept making the drug even after the shortage ended. Well, I just read this morning that they have settled the lawsuit and now they're going to work together. And it seems like, I guess, Hims and Hers will be selling the actual drug from Novo Nordisk rather than these compounded knockoffs. But that's just one example of how massive this industry has become. Okay, so remember I told you I was going to tell you a little bit more about the economics of the influencing game. Okay, so what is that? Basically, they have no skin in the game. They get affiliate commissions. What does that mean? They get a piece of everything that you buy based on their recommendation. Typically, they frame this as though they're doing you a favor, like, oh my God, totally use my code for a discount. What that really means is use my code and I'm going to get a rip. Thank you very much. The telehealth funnels this stuff, okay, through these influencer discount codes. They get a rip, you buy the thing because you feel like you're joining them on their health journey. You've learned from them and their story, et cetera, et cetera. This is all very highly produced. It's optimized for virality. Remember, these people are beyond smart, these telehealth platforms and these digital platforms. They know to use short reels. They know to use before and after imagery. A lot of it's AI generated. I'm going to show you some of that later. The influencers may or may not be employees of the brand. They may or may not be owners. They may or may not have an equity stake. They may or may not get a rip based on everything using the discount code. You don't know unless they voluntarily disclose it. Now, every talk I give, you notice I introduce myself. I tell you my practice, and I tell you I'm the founder of the Wealth Theory. I'm very upfront about it. I don't get paid by any advertisers to do this. Yes, I own a natural supplement company, but I tell you this stuff and educate you just to do it. I'm not forcing anybody to buy anything, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm very upfront about it. That is voluntary disclosure. Think back to the last time you saw an influencer video. What voluntary disclosure did you see? Probably none. So I'm just telling you, none of these people are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. And they have no skin in the game. I have skin in the game. These people do not. Okay, now, if you insist on using these peptides, I'm going to tell you, it is pretty cheap to do it yourself directly from China. Don't fall for the hype from these companies that it's safer through them or from the doctors that it's safer through them. Everything is made in China and they get it shipped and they just slap a new label on it. You can order it direct from China. I'm going to tell you later how you can make that safe and do your own testing. So look, this is $5.24 for a vial. This thing on the left says, it's a headline from a, I can't remember the news site I found this on, but it says, it seems bad that Temu is selling peptides, but that is what is going on. You can go on Temu and get peptides. You don't need to get it through your local doctor. It's the same stuff.
Controversial take.
You're saying that or somebody said that?
No, you should disclaim that.
Oh, this is controversial. Okay, it is so cheap. So here's another ad I found. 3 vials for $125. That means $42 per vial. You're probably paying $200 to $300 per vial, am I right? Or more if you're doing these things. One thing I want to dispel the myth of, and this is false, thus in red writing, a lot of times you're going to see that these are derived naturally from gastric juices or derived naturally from yada yada. These are all synthetic peptides, all made in a lab from the constituent amino acids. And I'm going to describe that process briefly. This on the bottom is BPC-157. That is the string of amino acids. That is the chemical code that is fed into the lab, and the constituent amino acids are chemically put together with solvents and different things like that. And at the end, you may or may not get BPC-157, assuming the manufacturing process is quality, clean, up to scale, and high tech enough. Okay, so remember, the influencer's getting a flat fee per post in some cases, a flat fee per series of posts, or their rate scale with follower engagement. And all of this is riding on the bandwagon of dissatisfaction with the medical industry. All right, there's revenue share with the telehealth clinics. And if you have a provider using a telehealth platform or some sort of online platform, They are likely an affiliate to all the products they are selling, okay? Many peptide protocols are sold to you by way of a subscription per month through a telehealth company, okay? And the provider or the mid-level or whomever is usually getting a piece of this somehow. There's like a bounty per referral in the industry lingo. All right. So the companies will teach a doctor or the influencer how to spin up this co-branded hormone replacement therapy or peptide line with the integrated telemedicine company and the lab testing, okay, which may or may not be legit lab testing. I already told you about the equity stakes or options. It's the same way the liquor market works. All those spirits out there that have a celebrity influencer, that guy's being paid hand over fist to tell you that's the best whatever in the business. So just remember that when you find yourself falling for it, because they know that you will. I just told you about that 2022 study. And usually these celebrities or these influencers position this as their own health journey or their own story, or this happened to me and this made me better. So they give you a story because storytelling works. Narrative lines works the best to sell products. The market growth is expected to be $300 billion by 2030. Now, if you have a market that's that big, who do you think isn't going to jump into this? All right. Just so you know, there are rules for disclosure, and some people are starting to get in trouble for this, but perhaps not enough. Debatable point. You're supposed to disclose any material connection. So when you see, let's say, Joe Smith, rando celebrity, I just made that name up, saying, hey man, I used peptides and my elbow pain got better in a day. He's supposed to tell you whether he's getting a product discount, money, perks, employment, ownership, free marketing, whatever material connection he has, that's supposed to be disclosed. And the disclosure is supposed to be obvious. It's not supposed to be little tiny fine print at the bottom of the ad or whited out script that you can't see but technically is there. Okay, that's another trick. And the FTC also requires that the claims be truthful and not misleading and supported by competent and reliable scientific evidence. Well, that's great and all, but that you don't have to do if it's a banned substance. That rule is gone. The FTC has nothing to regulate because it's banned. Thus the perfect storm. So many Reels and TikToks include no clear disclosure, despite known affiliate links or clinic referrals or telehealth kickbacks, whatever. Terms like partner, collaboration, or ambassador are used in ways to obscure the actual fact of a monetary relation. And the health claims go far beyond the underlying evidence, and I'm going to tell you what the underlying evidence is later in this talk. Heals everything from gut to tendons to brain. Would not meet the FTC and the FDA's normal rules for making claims, okay? But again, if it's a banned substance, if it's research only and not for human use, none of those rules apply. So you might be thinking, well, supplements advertise this way, right? Like, what's the difference between a supplement or a peptide? Well, most supplements are what's called GRAS, generally recognized as safe. That is a particular category the FDA has. The FDA does, in fact, regulate this industry, even though a lot of people like to tell you they don't. You're either GRAS or you're not GRAS, okay? It's either been in the food supply and known to be safe, or it's been used for thousands of years in Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese medicine, Native American medicine, South American medicine, whatever. And there's hundreds of years of use, hundreds of years of data, and many, many clinical studies. Typically, most supplements are micronutrients and different phytochemicals or plant chemicals that are found naturally in the food supply. For instance, tart cherry extract, one of my favorite and one of the Well Theory's best products, is using anthocyanins found naturally in the skin of tart cherries, generally recognized as safe, been in the food industry for 1 million years. It's no different taking an extract capsule than eating like 150 cherries. And there's tons of studies on this stuff, including human studies. Now, the peptides don't have all of that. They're not generally recognized as safe. They're considered a biologic new drug with no approved use for anything in a human in this country. And they've only been around for a few years. The newer peptides, the ones you're starting to see about, have only been used this extensively on humans for the past, I don't know, 2 to 3 years. It has become blindingly obvious, perhaps longer than that. The GLP-1s have been around for a bit longer because Rybelsus, different little drugs that you may or may not remember in the weight loss routine in the diabetic industry have been around. So these do have some good data behind them. And remember, the GLP-1s, the GIPs, and now the GCGs, or the three element retatrutide, I can't remember this brand name they're going to come up with. All of those went through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 FDA studies. Thousands of patients, heavily scrutinized, statistically valid data, and that can be debated. They're only just now allowing Bayesian statistics, for example. But much better study than anything that you or your friends or your gym guy or your roofer is probably taking. So these things are positioned as being natural or bioidentical. We see that a lot in the hormone world. The peptides are described as already in your body and therefore safer than drugs, even when the unapproved product is a synthetic that may or may not have impurities, probably does, and is given in supraphysiologic dosing, so in like much higher doses than your body would ever want. They're recasted as wellness hacks, not as treatments. So they're recasted and framed for you as a lifestyle tool rather than a prescription treatment. And this sidesteps all of the traditional medical, I guess, disease-oriented marketing. Usually you have the N of one, or one subject, or what we call anecdata. So one guy's story. So I see this a lot of times when I'm talking to friends and family. They tell me, well, how can you say that peptides aren't good? Because my buddy at the gym, he used to have knee pain and he takes them and he says he doesn't have knee pain anymore. So it works. Okay, that's an N of one. There's no statistically driven population study, and you have no idea what's actually going on in that N of one. It's usually charismatic testimonials. Okay, my elbow healed in 2 weeks. I reversed aging in 90 days. It's pseudo data. There's no mention of anything else going on in that person's life, no mention of any surgeries, no mention of their medical history, no mention of their genetics, et cetera, et cetera. So you have no idea what any of the other variables are. And always there's risk minimization. And this is the key to getting you to fall for this. Many products are research only. We know that. They should all be labeled as such. But what you're told is, if you get it from me, it's safer, it's tested. I get it from a safe compounding pharmacy. But remember, if it's being made in a compounding pharmacy in this country, it's being made illegally right now, okay? The FDA scrutiny and the WADA bans, what's the WADA? The World Anti-Doping Agency. All of these are illegal for athletes, okay? Olympic athletes, World Cup athletes, professional athletes. WADA has banned all of these. That's never mentioned. The anti-doping authorities list clearly include BPC-157, TB-500. They're ineligible for legal compounding. They're banned in this country, and they're definitely banned by the anti-doping agencies. Never mentioned in any of the influencer ads. Here's just a short list of some of the banned substances, and you can go on FDA's website right now and find the full list. BPC-157, dihexa, epitalon, GHKCU, melanotin 2, KPV. The list goes on and on. All of these are banned. When I say banned, no one should be making them. No compounding pharmacy is allowed to make these substances. They can still make GLP-1 and things like that if they've cut a deal with the manufacturers, or if somebody has a real reason to have the formulation changed for some allergy or something. But these are full on, currently banned by the FDA, and I'm going to tell you what that means. I'm going to talk about the risks and why the FDA banned them later. Okay. What can you do to protect yourself? So you should demand basic evidentiary hygiene, we say. So is there an actual FDA-approved use for this product? In the case of most peptides, the true answer is no. If you're told yes, that is a lie, unless it's GLP-1 or GIP, okay? Is it at least in a registered human trial with published data? Generally, the answer for that's going to be no. News investigations note that many of these peptides lack adequate clinical trials, but they're widely pushed online. I'm going to tell you about the 3 human trials that are used and referenced in many other articles about BPC-157. And we're going to get into those human trials, and I'm going to show you how bad this data really is. Watch for these incomplete risk disclosures, okay? And watch for the incomplete financial disclosures. The health risks, such as infection, immune reactions, off-target effects, possible propagation of cancer, none of this is mentioned in any of these ads. Okay, we can go on. I already talked about that. All right, here's some examples. I just threw up 3 headlines I found of lawsuits that have been successful against influencers for failing to disclose things properly, okay? You have to separate actual medicine and actual care of your body from aspirational branding. Nothing that you take is going to turn you into Joe Rogan. Nothing that you take is going to turn you into Serena Williams. That is called aspirational branding. We all wish and hope, but that is not going to happen, okay? Telehealth and longevity brands explicitly use the influencer culture. They make these prescription adjacent therapies, because remember, if it's research only, you don't need a prescription. They make it feel like a lifestyle upgrade instead of a regulated medical intervention, because it's not a regulated medical intervention because it's illegal. So they tell you it's a lifestyle upgrade, or they just make you feel like that. So they can distort your expectation. They can distort your actual informed consent. And remember, they know this, that 2022 study showed that all of these facts, many people watching this talk are going to poo-poo this talk, troll, put about it negative comments, and still go take it because they believe the influencers more than the facts, which is fine. I'm just telling you that that's been studied, and that's why they're using the influencers and not facts to market this. But my doctor prescribed it. How could it be bad? It is not legal for a doctor to be telling you how to use this, any protocols, to be giving you a prescription, or to be selling it. That is not allowed. If the FDA has banned a substance in this country, it is not allowed to be made in a compounding facility. So the doctors that are telling you the substance is safe because it's made in their favorite compounding facility, that's even worse, because the compounding facilities aren't allowed to be doing it. Then in that case, if it is a banned drug with no approved use in a human in this country, a physician is not supposed to be prescribing it or recommending it, period. It is not legal for a physician to prescribe a gray market research-only chemical for human use in our country at this time. Now, maybe the rules will change. I don't know. Maybe they should change. I don't know. But these are the rules right now. And that is why I don't do it, not to mention the bad data behind it. So even if it is legal soon, I'm still not sure about it. But right now it's illegal for a physician to prescribe, recommend, sell, create a protocol for an unapproved new drug that has been banned in this country. Many providers think that it's just off-label use. They're wrong, or they have they're sticking their head in the sand. They're like ostriches with the head in the sand, ignoring the full-on clear fact that it's illegal and has been since 2023. And they feel like it's just off-label use. But something can only be off-label if it has been approved with an approved label for another use. For instance, a lot of physicians, myself included, prescribe gabapentin for nerve pain, okay? Gabapentin was approved for seizures like years and years and years ago. So that is an off-label use. But it's an off-label use of an approved drug that has gone through rigorous safety testing, okay? That is the difference. Off-label use of an approved drug means at least it's had the safety testing, and we know that it doesn't have too many adverse events, or if it does, they're controllable or treatable, okay? So this is not off-label use of an approved drug. This is an unapproved drug with no data behind it whatsoever. They've never been approved for any use, with the exception of the tirzepatide, semaglutide that we already talked about. So if it's off-label, it's been used for one condition safely. Remember that. These are not off-label drugs. It is illegal to tell people to take these things, in my opinion, my interpretation of the law.
What about chiropractors giving peptides?
I just got a question. What about chiropractors giving peptides? Again, a chiropractor is a provider in this country, and to my understanding of the law, that is illegal. All right. So again, a provider should not be prescribing, recommending, selling, or teaching a protocol with a banned substance that is not approved for any human use in the United States of America. They are prescribing an unapproved new drug, which is not legal. What they're banking on is a lack of enforcement. Basically, everybody's hoping the FDA won't notice them, the FTC won't notice them, the OIG won't notice them, the state medical boards won't notice them, whatever, and that they're going to get away with it. And it's so much money, it's hard to not do this, okay? The recommendation even of a specific protocol, like if I said, oh, patient Z, you should shoot Wolverine up every Wednesday when it's 60 degrees out, if it's not too cloudy, 2 hours before you eat a tomato. If I give you a protocol for an illegal banned substance not for human use, I'm also not even supposed to do that. So I don't. Now, we all have issues with the FDA. I have issues with the FDA. I get it. But their process, although it needs some work, has a good intention. I'm going to tell you why it's better than nothing. They have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 for new drugs. Phase 1 is efficacy. You have to prove that it actually works, that it's not just placebo effect. Phase 2 is safety data to prove that it's safe for most people to take in most conditions. Phase 3 is very large group efficacy and safety studying. So you prove it works, you prove it's safe, then you double really prove that it works and it's safe. Then you have an approved new drug, and those can be used off-label. Okay, that's just the practice of medicine. But if you have an unapproved new drug, theoretically, they're not supposed to be used that way. Throughout all of these studies, every single adverse event is recorded. Now, we've all opened packages of medicine, and you see this folded white piece of paper, and you open it up, and it's bigger than a newspaper in tiny fine print, telling you every single possible adverse event that could ever happen taking that drug. That is why. Those are all the adverse events that were reported during phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, so that you, the consumer, know what you're getting into. Now, some of those adverse events may or may not be because of the drug, but the company, the pharmaceutical company, has to report it. Better than that, there's a reporting system later when the drug is released to the market for people to report adverse events and doctors to report adverse events that happen later that nobody picked up early. I've told you in previous talks that a full, I think 5% of FDA-approved drugs are pulled off the market almost annually because of newly found adverse events. Now, that means this system works. It's not perfect. It could be better. We know that. But effectively, it's working to keep the population safe with these reporting avenues for adverse events. Now, if you have an unapproved substance that is research only and is banned in the United States of America, but that you can order from Temu online and inject yourself, nobody's reporting anything to anyone. There's no way to report anything to anyone. There is no central repository for adverse events. No one is keeping statistics on this. No one is studying it. Therefore, this is a perfect product to sell to the public because you will never have bad news about it. Most people that are telling you about it are invested in it in some way or another, and maybe not even financially. They may just have an emotional attachment to it and really just believe. And therefore, like all other biases, they're going to ignore anything that creates cognitive dissonance in their brain and tells them it doesn't work. So just remember, with these unapproved peptides that have been banned since 2023, we have no idea what they're actually doing to people because nobody has to tell anybody else. How are these things made? Well, we don't really know, and that's kind of the point, and that's what worries me the most. Here's a picture of a pharmaceutical facility in one part of China, the Wuxi Aptec Peptide manufacturing facility. And here's an example of the liquid being heated up before it's processed in the solid state. I'm going to talk about that very briefly. But this is a laboratory process made from constituent amino acids. Where they get those, I have no earthly idea, I will be honest. I don't know where they get the amino acids. I probably don't want to know, but they get them. They put them together with solid phase manufacturing somewhere in China, and then they sell them to us online. So it's an entirely synthetic chemical reaction process. There is no extraction of a natural substance. That is not happening. They are not derived from natural gastric secretions. That is not happening. This is what's called SPS, solid phase peptide synthesis. FMOC is a chemical that is used. I'm going to try to pronounce this for you. 9-fluorenyl-methoxycarbonyl protecting group chemistry on a polymer resin. A 15 amino acid chain is built this way, one residue at a time, and then they're cleaved. And HPLC, I'm pretty sure that means high something, liquid chromatography, purification. And then they're lyophilized or dried out into a powder. Most of these factories are in Shanxi, Zhejiang, and Guangdong, and I probably said that wrong. Quality and purity vary wildly. Nobody has seen how these are actually made over there that I know of. There's a 44% surge recently in non-FDA registered Chinese imports. An FDA restriction in this country drives almost all business to the foreign entities. Now, you've seen this with Bitcoin. Initially, everything was driven to off-premise or off-country platforms like Tether, et cetera. You've seen this with illegal drugs, okay? Nobody makes fentanyl or heroin in this country that we know of, or we hope not. And now we've seen it with peptides. Because you can't make it legally in this country, most of it is going to be made in a non-registered FDA factory in China. Why non-FDA registered? First of all, why? It's not even allowed, so it's research only, so you don't need the FDA coming in sniffing around. That's why. And then everyone has their own private Chinese peptide dealer. Remember the very first slide of this talk? San Francisco Standard reported this in September of 2025. Great article. I advise you read it. Talking about how everybody has their own Chinese peptide dealer. And here's your roofer pulling out his peptide to inject his BPC on his lunch break. So beware of the source. There are no tours of these factories. There are no videos of this manufacturing process. I was able to ascertain there's a 2011 patent of the process to make this stuff by some Chinese scientists. It's a very complicated synthetic process. And I have to think to myself, I'm not sure why all these people that seem to be proponents of longevity, wellness, healthy lifestyles are 100% okay with injecting a substance made in China in this way into their body, but they won't eat ultra-processed foods. Like there's some cognitive dissonance I don't get. It is not a very whole food situation taking these peptides. Why is this being allowed? Honestly, I have no idea. I can't figure it out. Let's talk, and I know this is a long talk, bear with me. Let's talk about the history of these peptides. I told you I was going to get specific about BPC-157. That's the one I'm asked about most in an orthopedic clinic, so I'm going to talk about that the most. This is called body protective compound number 157. Predrag Sikiric, I think I'm saying that correctly, at the University of Zagreb, Croatia, which was Yugoslavia, by the way, in the USSR at the time, isolated BPC when he was examining how the stomach protects itself. So as you know, the stomach has tons of acid, and they were wondering at the time, legitimate scientific question, well, how does the acid not destroy the stomach lining itself? So this guy, André Robert, out of France, did a lot of work on stomach protection. He called it cytoprotection. And then Predrag, or Dr. I don't even know if he's a doctor, Sikiric out of Yugoslavia, now Croatia, hopped on this and started looking at BPC-157. They isolated a 15 amino acid fragment made of these 15 amino acids, and then they figured out a key sequence for the protection of the stomach lining. So they found that this was a part of a larger molecule made by the stomach cells that was stable in gastric juice and resistant to enzymatic breakdown. Most of the things we take orally are going to be broken down if they're not absorbed right away, and then the constituent pieces and parts will be used. So that's what in the pharmaceutical industry we call first pass. So when you take a drug orally, you have first pass metabolism, which is A, how much even gets into the system, and then B, what does the liver do with it right away? But this is where it started, way back in the day, about 30 plus years ago in Yugoslavia, now Croatia. Okay, so it's 34 years old and there's almost no human studies. That alone should make you wonder, okay? 1992 is the earliest study, I think, and this is Dr. Kadiric, and it was a new potent peptide named body protective compound. The Journal of Physiology in 1993 described it as a stomach stress organoprotection hypothesis. And this is legit basic science work. I'm not one to poo-poo that too much. If it all pans out and BPC-157 does prove to be what it is, great. We'll all jump on board. But 34 years later, the pharmaceutical industry having as much money as it does and scientists all over the world looking for products and substances, I have to wonder to myself, why wasn't this already done? Something must have turned the pharmaceutical companies off of it, okay? Now you may say, oh, well, you can't patent it because it's a natural peptide, but they sure were able to patent Ozempic. So that kind of doesn't make sense to me. I haven't delved into that, so I don't have a lot of data to back that up. But 1992 is our earliest study. 1993, the organoprotection hypothesis was created, whereby now this guy, Predrag, links BPC-157 to not just protecting stomach cells, but everything. There are dozens of preclinical papers. What is a preclinical paper? Preclinical is code for animal. So these are animal studies. And they were found to counteract tissue damage in the gastric system and to provide organoprotection in general at low doses. Okay, so we have some evidence-ish, I call it. The late 90s, there's more preclinical studies. They show accelerated healing of skin wounds, burns, tendons, ligaments, muscles, bones, nerves, all in rats, okay? Angiogenesis or new blood cell promotion, antidepressant in animals too. How they figure out how a rat is depressed, whatever, that's a whole nother body of work I don't get. Very limited human data. There were some ulcerative colitis, which is of course a GI issue. In 1990 to 2000, there was some pharmacokinetics work in 2002. Supposedly no reported toxicity, okay? And all of the work, all of these preclinical studies we just discussed were more or less out of this original Croatian group or a smaller Taiwanese group. There are 3 human studies that are referenced often in more review articles that are coming out recently, and I'm going to talk about those next. But no studies in the preclinical world have really reproduced the results of these Croatian works the same. So one of the ways we validate in science is somebody produces something, and you should have a reproducible study that other labs can reproduce the results with the same setup. That hasn't really happened with these preclinical studies. And this is 34 years in. Okay. Most of the peptides are made here in these preclinical studies. Diogen, which is a company, guess where? Slovenia, with a relationship to Predrag, okay? They make the pentadecapeptide BPC-157. So their product is used in these studies that are then used to promote the theory of organoprotection and to, guess what, sell the product. A lot of people say, oh, it heals Achilles. It's proven in the studies. Well, there is one rat Achilles tendon study. I blew this up for you to see what I saw in this, okay? This is from 2003. What they did was they transected the Achilles tendon of a rat 5 millimeters above where it inserts on the heel bone. And then they gave one group BPC and one group they didn't. And this picture is what they used to show you that the BPC-157 works. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but the top right and the top left, it looks like the defect is bigger on the bottom one, which was just the saline injections. But to me, the lighting is different, and it looks like it just has a bigger shadow than the one at the top. So I don't even know if I believe that picture, more or less the rest of the data, which I'm about to tell you. Okay. Just so you know, in this Achilles rat study, the return to normal function in the untreated rats, so the ones that didn't get anything except the Achilles tendon cut, was 6 weeks to the age-matched control rats. And again, in this study, there was no mention if this other structure called the plantaris tendon was resected. That's a vestigial tendon that everybody has next to the Achilles, so do animals. No mention if it was a full transection or a partial transection. I couldn't really figure that out. And then if you look closely at this, which I'll emphasize in the next slide, the gap on the cut end between the tendons of the saline group, day 4, the minimum gap was 5.6 millimeters. The minimum gap in the BPC group was 2 millimeters. So they started with a smaller gap in this study, which they kind of spun it in the study to say that by day 4, this had already worked. To me, it means that they had a smaller gap because I doubt this worked in 4 days. Right, to heal it. So this is a study where they compared, this did not have BPC, okay? This is a study where they were comparing surgical repair versus no repair in a rat model of Achilles tendon injury. And in this, they used a similar, what they call AFI, Achilles Function Index, to test the function of the rat. And they found in this study that there was no statistical significance with respect to the initial impairment between the surgical and the non-surgical group in functional recovery after about 15 days. Think about that. You have a transected Achilles tendon. They repair one. They don't repair the other. They both end up the same at 15 days. But we're supposed to believe that BPC-157 works magically at day 4. But all of the rats in that study, they were equivalent at week 6. None of this is adding up for me. So perhaps it's no better than doing nothing? We don't know because nobody's reproduced these studies. So the pentadecapeptide BPC-157 treated rats at very early intervals, day 1 to 4, there was a smaller size and depth of the tendon defect. So if you start with a smaller defect, it's going to be easier to heal it quicker. Subsequently, the reestablishment of full tendon integrity, besides the defect, disappears in treated rats 3 days earlier than in controls. 14 days post-industry is when everybody's healed. 3 days earlier, that was all they could attribute to the BPC-157 in this. And remember, I showed you that picture, so I'm not even sure about that. And the device they used to mechanically test these healed tendons has not been validated for the way they used it. They used what's called a Statitat-M, which is designed for thread and yarn testing. It is used in some scientific studies for suture or single fascicles of tendon. So in other words, I don't have a tendon around, but let's say you take your FCR out of your wrist and you pull it out. You can pull different fibers off of that and line it up in this machine and test that. But it's not designed for the whole tendon. But that's how they used it. So, at this point, we know this substance is illegal. We know the initial work on this substance is from one group with a factory that makes this in a patent. We know the animal work could be done a little bit better, maybe not reproducible. Perhaps it's been reproduced since, but most of the data is coming out of this lab. But I'm sure it works. Rogan said so. He said it healed his elbow. How could it not work? One thing I did notice is if you go on this site, they're selling their stable patent. What? So they have a patent for an oral stable form of BPC-157, and they want to sell it. Now explain that to me if this is such a blockbuster, amazing drug that will work. It's forced. You could go buy the patent right now from these guys or license it. 1998, they get a patent for BPC peptide salts. That's since out of patent. 2015, there is a registered phase 1 trial. No published results. We don't really know what happened to that. Kind of just disappeared. 2020, it's said to have a favorable safety profile. 2022, the World Anti-Doping Agency bans it. 2023, the FDA bans it. And now 2020 to 2025, everybody's trying to patent various novel combinations because for some reason, the US Patent Office decided to make it okay that if you combine something found in nature in a novel way, that can be patented. So that's happening. So if all that's happening, why are they selling this patent? I don't understand. Okay, there must be good data, or it must work if rich people and athletes use it, right? Right? There are case reports. There's a retrospective observational study, very small intra-articular knee injections. There's anecdotal information only. Most of this is from bodybuilders, influencers, celebrities, etc. And again, I told you the economics of that world. There are no large randomized human trials. Safety has not been proven per the FDA. Efficacy, meaning does it work, has not been proven per the FDA. The FDA has not approved this for any human use. Beyond that, they have banned it. Therefore, it can only be used in this country for research only, meaning you're only supposed to be ordering this and using it if you're studying it in a lab or you have a registered clinical trial with the federal government where the patients sign up and everybody knows about it. That is not happening. So let's quickly discuss the 3 human studies that are used by most review studies to say that there are human studies and there's human data on this. Intra-articular injection of BPC-157 for multiple types of knee pain. Main author, Edwin Lee. Effect of BPC-157 on symptoms in patients with interstitial cystitis, a pilot study, author Edwin Lee. Safety of intravenous infusion of BPC-157 in humans, IV infusion, a pilot study, Edwin Lee. Interesting, okay. I don't know much about Edwin Lee. Maybe he's a prolific researcher, I don't know. But I will tell you this. All 3 of these studies were out of Orlando, Florida, from the Institute of Hormonal Balance and Urogyne Specialists. That was the cystitis study. This is a web shot of this institute. Next slide. Oh, sorry. I'm going to tell you about each study in turn. The intra-articular knee injection study. Retrospective, so they just looked back at their patients. Common way to do studies, nothing wrong there, but it's not considered good data. A survey, and when you read the materials and methods of this study, and just so you know, I pulled each of these and read each study word for word. A phone call was made by a college student at this Institute for Hormonal Balance. So the college student is calling patients of the Institute for Hormonal Balance and asking them later, how did that work for you? 16 patients only. 12 got BPC-157 put in their knee. 4 got BPC-157 and TB4, otherwise known now as the Wolverine. And these 2 groups are compared to each other out of the same clinic by this college kid. Group 1 had 92% significant improvement, and significant was a very vague term they use. And I guess the college kid decided if that was significant or not. And group 2, 75%. In the body of the paper, it says, quote, later in the trial, only BPC-157 was offered since I observed that patients were improving with both peptides. I wanted to test the hypothesis that injecting BPC-157 alone can decrease knee pain. So he's acting like this study had a prospective nature to it, but it was retrospective. So the language is suspect too. Meanwhile, just so you know, TB4 was kind of more or less pulled off of the market for cancer-causing risk. Maybe not technically pulled off the market because it's banned anyway, but a lot of information started coming out about propagation of nascent tumors. I'm wondering if that was related, but I'll take him as his word. He wanted to test a hypothesis. So 4 people got the Wolverine, and then the rest got just BPC. The college kid calls them up. They say, yeah, I'm doing great. Meanwhile, by the way, all of these people paid for these injections. So some possible issues with this study. I'm not saying it's not a good study. It was published. I'm not saying anything about that. Here's some possible issues that if you were in a journal club, this is the kind of critique that would come up. You're comparing a group with BPC to another group with BPC that has another peptide added. There's no natural history group. There's no placebo group. There's no comparison to hyaluronic acid or like Synvisc. There's no comparison to steroids. There's no comparison to Toradol. There's like no comparative efficacy with a known FDA-approved substance. It's retrospective, it's small, from one institute, and it's a survey study. So this is 2021 that this study comes out, okay? And in that study, it is mentioned where the BPC-157 was made. Tailor-made compounding out of Kentucky. Well, in this study, it is admitted that the peptides are made synthetically, okay, that they are compounded, the solid phase reaction we talked about. Since then, the guy that owns this compounding pharmacy pleads guilty to unlawful distribution of prescription drugs and basically gets a sentence from the feds. So the DOJ goes after these guys. Nowhere in the study does it say where the APIs are from, the active pharmaceutical ingredients. So where are the amino acids from? We don't know. They don't even really say if they make it there or not, or if they're just packaging it there or not. What we do know is that since then, this particular facility got in trouble for selling unapproved products illegally, okay? So this is the 2021 study where this is actually named tailor-made compounding. I'm just going to read you from the FDA site about when they shut this all down. During the inspection, the FDA investigators noted that the drug products produced by your firm failed to meet the conditions of Section 503A. This is before the ban, remember. For example, the investigators noted that your firm compounded drug products using follistatin, GHRP2, GHRP6, and Endurabol, AOD 9604, BPC-157, PT-141, cerebrolysin, so on and so forth, a bunch of words nobody can pronounce. Drug products compounded using these bulk drug substances are not eligible for the exemptions provided by Section 503A because they are not subject of an applicable USP or NF monograph, are not a component of an FDA-approved human drug, and do not appear on the 503A bulks list. What does that mean? They weren't supposed to be making these. They were not approved even in 2021, so they got spanked pretty hard. I think that the owner went to jail. I'm not quite sure on that, but there was definitely a massive fine. So 2021, there were a lot of rules already percolating up about the 503A, which is how compounding pharmacies are described in all the federal registers. So when you see 503A, think compounding. Fully knocked down by the FDA in 2023. At that point, research use only. So no longer tested or controlled in any way, shape, or form. Not allowed to be sold, therefore can't be regulated, and therefore any claim can be made. Because it is banned to be used in compounding, it should also not be prescribed by any physician with a license. And that is why most people have a peptide guy like their roofer or the gym rat they work out with. That is really the only source you should be getting it from, because doctors should not be peddling this stuff. And I'm not saying should in any sort of proactive way.
So there's no regulated pharmacy that provides pharmaceutical grade peptides with proper oversight.
There is no compounding pharmacy that is legally providing these substances right now. Correct. So here we have a big old red flag. When the FDA bans something, the black market takes over. Now, one thing I hear from some providers that are very rah-rah about this stuff, which believe me, I want this stuff to work because I would like to offer it to people. I just don't trust it and it's illegal and I don't like to break laws. One thing I hear is, oh, everybody wants it. There's overwhelming demand. Therefore, I must provide it to them. Well, the same could be said about cocaine and heroin. There's overwhelming demand for those drugs, but you don't really see doctors prescribing it too often. Just saying. So when the FDA bans, the black market encourages these things. Most BPC-157 is sold online direct to consumer. Remember, you can get it on Temu very cheaply. And it should be for research only. So if you have a lab in your kitchen and you're doing rat studies, knock yourself out. Order this stuff all day long. That's okay. But if you're not, I probably wouldn't. And if you're injecting it in yourself and you think it's safe, don't worry. There is some extensive rodent literature out of Yugoslavia. Now Croatia. So what happened in 2023? BPC, among others, I'm just going to continue to harp on BPC because that's the one I'm asked about most, was placed on Category 2 of the bulk drug substances under Section 503A of the Federal Register. Remember, 503A is a compounding pharmacy. 503B is a bulk outsourcing pharmacy. The FDA is prohibiting compounding pharmacies from putting BPC into any preparation, even with a prescription. If you are getting this with a prescription, the pharmacy is at risk of enforcement. If they are making it, they're at risk of enforcement, and the doctor is too. Human data remains limited to one phase 1 unpublished study and one phase 2 UC trial that had summarized data but was not fully detailed, and these few small uncontrolled studies, of which I already told you about one of them, the knee injection study of, 14 to 16 patients that a college kid called them up later on out of the Institute for Hormonal Balance. So let's talk more about the rest of the human studies. So effect BPC-157 on symptoms of patients with interstitial cystitis. In this study, it says, quote, trial has been conducted using the non-FDA approved BPC-157 peptide, end quote. That's misleading. It's banned. It's not just unapproved. It's not FDA approved for any human use, and it's not allowed to be made in this country. And again, we have another retrospective study and another survey study. And here's the quote of how they statistically analyze their data. Quote, our data analysis rated patients' responses to treatment from being significantly worse to no change to being significantly better after therapy, end quote. No validated scale, no validated outcome, anything. Basically, they called them up and said, are you worse, same, or better? And then they use their own judgment and put them into whatever bucket. Seems very vague to me. But again, a lot of studies are like this. I'm not poo-pooing that, so I'm just giving you the facts. You're still going to make your own decision ultimately. 12 subjects, only a 6-week follow-up. Remember, 6 weeks, not year. You know how long it takes a nascent cancer cell to form into a tumor? Sometimes 7 to 10 years. This is 6-week follow-up. Pick up the phone, call them, say, hey, are you worse, no better, the same? Okay, cool, bye. And there's your study. 6 weeks is not enough time to really know anything, in my opinion. So this is a 2024 study. And in this study, they say now, the peptide BPC-157 was obtained from a 503A compounding pharmacy in the US that does not wish to disclose its name. That's literally in this paper. There were no issues for naming the source in 2021, so what changed? And again, quote, BPC-157 is a naturally derived peptide from human stomach fluid, end quote. No, it's not. All BPC is made in a lab. No one is extracting this from stomach juice. The FDA has banned 503A compound pharmacies from producing many peptides due to lack of data showing their safety and efficacy. The FDA has not restricted physicians from prescribing peptides. That's in quotes in this study. The FDA does not engage in the practice of medicine. You should know that. It is illegal to prescribe a banned substance that is an unapproved new drug in this country. But the FDA is not going to spank a doctor. Only the medical board and the OIG or the DOJ will. So unless the medical boards have their little spidey sense up and they're looking for these violations, the doctor's going to keep getting away with it because the FDA has no role in the practice of medicine. So he's right. The FDA has not restricted physicians from prescribing peptides because that is not what the FDA does. That's like saying the U.S. Commerce Department has not restricted physicians from prescribing illegal peptides. You're right, because that's not their role. So very misleading, sort of factually correct, sort of not. But interesting that they no longer mention or name the compounding pharmacy. Why? Because it's illegal for them to be making it and they'll be shut down immediately. And then they sort of hedge their words to say that it's okay for me to tell you to take this, but it's really not.
Carol might be on her way out, but she wanted to say thank you.
Oh, Carol's got to go. You can watch the rest of it. It's recorded. All right, so that's we talked about the intra-articular knee study 2021, and then the 2024 cystitis study. Now we have the safety of IV infusions of Oh my God, research only BPC-157 from China. People are injecting it into their veins, into their system, and it's going everywhere. This is 2025. As of March 20, this is a quote, as of March 2025, the FDA ban on peptides has not been finalized, awaiting the outcome of a pending lawsuit. Sorry. This is and there may or may not be a pending lawsuit, but in my opinion, it's illegal, so I'm not recommending this to anybody. This is a 2-person study with 3 days of follow-up. Blood work was done on day 1, day 2, and day 3, and based on that, it was said to be safe. No big changes in what was checked. In other words, the blood work was more or less the same on day 1, day 2, and day 3. Therefore, injecting this IV is safe for you and me. Quote, legally, the FDA has no issues with physicians using peptides, but they prohibit the 503A compounding pharmacies from producing them. Yes, the FDA does not regulate physicians. That's true. And yes, if a physician wants to order BPC-157 from Temu and inject it into themselves, they can, I guess. So technically, that's a true statement. The state medical boards regulate our licenses, as does the OIG and DOJ, okay? And even they can't take away your license because it's a property. The state medical board has to. So technically, it's a correct statement, but don't be fooled. No 503A pharmacy is supposed to be making this stuff for any human use. No one should be getting it through a prescription or otherwise. If you're ordering it research only, you're supposed to be doing research, just so you know. Why are these things banned? Well, there are serious potential problems. There's a risk for what's called immunogenicity. This is especially with certain routes, like injecting sub-Q, intramuscular, intrafat, whatever. What does that mean? Well, if you inject a protein into your body, there is a chance that your immune system is going to glom onto that. And you can watch all my talks on the immune system before. It'll pick up whatever characteristics of that particular peptide and may or may not interpret it properly. And it may start attacking self. So we see this with certain drugs that people get, certain vaccines. The immune system develops sort of a sense for that particular structure of amino acid and will attack anything that it thinks is that. So you can become autoimmune. So there's a risk for immunogenicity. And they can trigger severe immune responses like hypersensitivities, skin disorders, GI issues, various immunes, we don't even know. So there's a big risk for that. There are impurities and API characterization challenges. What does that mean? Again, I have no idea where they're getting these amino acids. I can't find that information really. It's not very easy. And remember, it's a series, it's a chain reaction they have to do with that chemical I named in the beginning. And then they have to cleave it, and then they have to process it, and then they have to dry it. Many steps in this factory that no one's allowed in to look at and see, and nobody tours. So at any point, there could be an impurity, or maybe the amino acids made just one molecule differently, or maybe this covalent bond's just slightly different. Well, in the human body, that makes a massive difference. So we don't know if it's perfect. It's a synthetic 15 amino acid peptide, okay, made with solid phase synthesis that often produces impurities, truncations, deletions, aggregates, byproducts. These are hard to fully detect or control with standard methods. So that can affect the potency, the stability, or the safety. A lot of your third-party testing is really just looking for like heavy metals and pesticides. They're not checking for the potency, stability, and safety of any given molecule that you get from a research-only lab in China. So the testing itself, I'm not even sure I fully trust.
So the compounding pharmacies are not making that themselves. They get ingredients from China.
The question is, are these compounding pharmacies making this themselves? We don't know. They don't tell us what their process is, but most times, yes, I believe they're getting their APIs from China. I don't see these big solid synthesis labs around. A lot of compounding pharmacies, if you notice, are thrown up in a strip mall, and they may have a couple vials or Erlenmeyer flasks, but they don't have these really complicated labs. And there's a few. I use one for certain peptides that are approved that I recommend to patients. I use one in Houston. There's a few around the country that are legit and real. But in general, no, they're not making this themselves. And if they are, they're doing it illegally. We don't know where the APIs come from, et cetera, et cetera. Limited or no safety-related information. I already told you that. You've got a 3-day study, a 6-week study, and like another 6-week study. Those are your human studies. All right, I guess we're on the next slide. Let me tell you about TB4 and TB500. Remember I told you that's part of the Wolverine, and in that first study, the knee study, it sort of got pulled out of the injections and the majority just got BPC-157. Well, TB4 and the fragment TB500 is what people use now. TB4 was found to promote angiogenesis, promote cell migration, promote anti-apoptosis. Apoptosis means cell death. This all sounds great, right? That's what the anti-aging community wants. They want new blood vessels. We want cells to migrate and move and grow. We want no cell death. Well, unfortunately, those 3 features is how cancer grows. Cancer creates its own blood supply, it moves around the body, and it doesn't die, and it keeps propagating. So these characteristics are framed as a feature to you, but they may just be a bug, okay? The same features are used by cancer to grow, and this was in a 2009 article. TB4 has been found to be overexpressed at the invasion front of tumors, okay? And that was in a 2012 study. So this peptide that people are taking to promote cell growth and healing and repair and regeneration, based on 3 human studies with at most a 6-week follow-up that were college kids calling people, okay, are the same substances that are found at the invading cell line of tumors. So that's a little worrisome to me, but that's just me. That may not worry you, and that's fine. This is concerning to me. And until this is teased out and understood better, I'm a bit reticent to take this myself. I'm not doing that. I'm not going to tell my family to take it. Certainly not going to tell my patients to take it. And also I can't because that's illegal. So the literature has identified thymosin beta-4 as a potential biomarker progression factor in several malignancies, particularly colorectal, by the way. So if you still are riding the influencer bandwagon and you still want to take these peptides, please go get screened for cancer first. Cancer pre-screening is a must because we know thymosin beta-4 can promote the growth of undiagnosed cancer. We think maybe the other peptides might, nobody knows because there's no studies, there's no safety studies, but every feature that makes them theoretically good at healing things would also make cancer good at growing. So please go get screened for cancer. This is the thymosin beta-4 is expressed in most colon cancers. Possible link between a peptides and a link to metastases or transition to metastases. Can you go back one? Here's one paper. Thymosin beta-4 in colorectal cancer is localized predominantly at the invasion front of tumor cells undergoing epithelial mesenchymal transformation, i.e. turning malignant. While early safety data appears favorable, the potential for pro-angiogenic activity to influence oncogenic cancer-causing processes underscores the importance of comprehensive cancer pre-screening prior to therapeutic use. Now, did Timu ask you what was your cancer pre-screening? Did that doctor selling you this stuff give you a full cancer pre-screening? I'm going to guess no. But you need it. If you are insisting on doing this stuff yourself, please go do that. So again, the human data review summarized, very limited. It's probably all you need to know. Let me finish the slide. All right, my producer wants me to shut up, I guess. Really? So we talked about the small series of orthopedic case series and the cystitis study and the IV study out of the Institute for Hormonal Balance in Orlando, Florida. And just so you know, Edwin Lee is very, very pro-peptides. He's on some group that lobbies the US government to get it made legal, et cetera, et cetera. Many studies are written this way. A lot of these kind of studies are published. That's just the way it is nowadays, because you have to publish or you want to publish, and that's the easiest way to do it. But I don't think I would be injecting a research-only chemical into my body based on that work. And then the rest of it is older Croatian studies from the 90s and 2000s out of one particular lab, like I said, and most of it not reproducible. So let me just quickly compare this to another drug that was a flash in the pan, became viral before we even knew what that word meant in terms of social media. So DNP, I've talked about this before in a weight loss talk, dinitrophenol. It took about 4 to 5 years of heavy use in the public before people realized the real risks of this drug. This was a weight loss drug that was accidentally discovered in munitions factories during World War II. It worked a little too well. So the initial short-term trials showed no risk to humans. This is safe. This guy Tainter, this Dr. Tainter and his group at Stanford were the biggest ones to push this based on some Russian literature, okay? Same story. So we've got literature coming out of the Russia region. One group here does a few short-term studies and says it's safe for humans. It blows up, okay? Everybody's using DNP. Well, what happened? And this is still being used now illegally, okay, by the way. This is a story of a guy that was just convicted of manslaughter because he effectively killed this 21-year-old who took these pills of DNP that bought from this guy to lose weight. What does it do? It cooks you to death. So DNP was over the counter, marketed heavily for weight loss. Tainter reported 100,000 users within the first year with only 3 deaths. What? This was in 1934. Took a few years of heavy use, like I said, until they realized that what was happening was it was uncoupling the energy production, the mitochondria. Excessive levels of heat were produced. Yes, you lost weight, and yes, it upregulated your metabolism, but you effectively cooked yourself to death. And if you didn't die, a lot of people went blind because cataracts formed, or they got really weird, bizarre skin lesions or nerve problems. And it was finally banned by the FDA 4 years after it started being marketed by this group out of Stanford in 1938. Little cautionary tale from history. I'm not saying the peptides are going to go down this route. I don't want them to. But perhaps we should all learn from history in all aspects of our lives. So here are my thoughts. I would love to take it myself. It sounds amazing. Generally, I only offer products to the public that I do take myself and that I give to my friends and family, okay? Since I'm not going to do that with these peptides, I'm not going to offer it to the public. I'm not going to take it because I don't really trust those studies too much. I know too much about history. I know too much about medicine. I know that in these top-down central command and control regimes where some science is produced, perhaps the results can be a bit questionable. I don't trust the sourcing at all. And I don't trust the stories on social media because they're all paid. And just because they're pretty and they look good and they're famous, I mean, is that really a reason to inject something into your blood veins or sub-Q to go systemic? I've read the literature thoroughly and I'm waiting for more and better. Oh, and by the way, it's illegal. So beware. BPC-157 is going to be commonly sold as part of a protocol with TB500, which is TB4, GHKCU, or KPV. You're going to get sold protocols. You're going to be sold methods, things to do, recipe, eat this with this, whatever. It's going to promise rapid tissue repair, gut healing, joint recovery, full spectrum regeneration. You're going to be called the Wolverine. It's going to be called quad healing. You're going to get influencer and clinic messaging that's going to lean heavily on the animal data, the preclinical work, before and after stories, because that always works to catch people's eyes, and celebrity anecdotes, because influencers work more to influence purchasing behavior than medical facts. You're going to be told things like, Rogan's elbow was fixed in 2 weeks. You're going to be downplayed that these compounds are unapproved. You're going to be downplayed that they're banned as doping agents by sports authorities. You're going to be told the FDA ban is not real because there's a lawsuit. You're going to be told it's made at a 503A compounding facility and it's tested. All of that is how it's going to be marketed. But I've just told you what I think is the truth based on my research into this world. So is it legal? You may still be wondering. This is from, I want to say the FDA website, but don't quote me on that. There appears to be no legal basis for selling BPC-157 as a drug, food, or dietary supplement, and the Food and Drug Administration confirmed there is also no legal basis for compounding pharmacies to use BPC-157 in compounded medications. However, there is evidence that BPC-157 is being illegally included in some wellness and anti-aging treatments and products. So it's out there, but not in a legal way. And that is true for not just BPC-157, but for many of the other novel peptides. Please don't think I'm talking about Mounjaro or Wegovy. Those are legal. Those are approved. Those have been studied extensively, and I've read those studies too, and those are great studies. So you still want to do this? You still believe your gym guy? Great. Let me tell you, you do not need to trust a physician illegally prescribing it to you from an illegal compounding pharmacy. You can get it straight from China really, really cheaply and then there's a couple of startup companies, guess what, out of Silicon Valley. Finric is the name of one, and they will test your peptide samples for you. You just ship it to them in Texas. They'll even do it for free. They source and test your choice of vendor. They have a whole public-facing part where like they give you public data, I guess, by permission, but you can send yours in anonymously and privately and get it tested yourself. So why would you spend $300 a month on something that you could get for $5, spend on testing once, and then just do it that way? I don't think you should do it at all, but I'm just saying don't fall for the hype of, oh, it's safe because it's from me. I'm an authority figure in this fancy lab here that's illegally making it. And you don't need the veil of safety from a telehealth company. You literally can go online on Alibaba and get this stuff. Finric, funded by venture capital, they test samples, they publish results. This is from their website. We test peptides to make sovereign health safer. Sovereign health. What does that mean? They're pushing the whole narrative of medicine. People like me in a white coat are terrible, which a lot of us are. I'm not going to say we're not. But they're basically making it sound like if you take care of yourself and do your own medical care, you're going to be better off. I'm not sure I buy into that wholeheartedly, sovereign health. I do want to empower people to take better care of themselves and take their health and nutrition into their own hands. But there is still a big role for regular medical care, believe me. Transparent and accountable supply chains will make supplements, peptides, and other health and wellness products safer for the public. So if you still want to do this, get it cheaper, straight from China, because that's where it's all coming from anyway, and send it to one of these labs like Finric and get it tested. It is a scary world out there, though. Bear this in mind. Now with AI, you can get fake COAs put up on websites. So I could open, or my gardener or my pool guy could open a peptide company tomorrow. AI can make their website. AI can make very legitimate looking certificates of analysis or testing documents that you can download and look at. AI can do all of the e-commerce. They can make fake celebrities. They can make fake influencers. There's a company called 11 Labs that fakes voices. You can just license it, whatever celebrity you want. So anyone can spin up a site online and sell you peptides right now. And you might think it's legit. You might think there's a real testing apparatus behind it. And you might think that your favorite influencer is really behind it. And by the way, they know who your favorite influencer is. So you're going to be fed that ad. Just be mindful of that. Here's another one. Janoschik Analytical. This is out of Eastern Europe. One of the first testing labs. It's Slovakian. And again, they test anonymous submissions. So it's another tried and true testing lab that is legit, that does have a physical place. It's been around for a while. So between Finric and Genoshic Analytical, you can test your own peptides, but I don't think you should be doing this at all. And a last note about testing. They're going to look for some impurities like pesticides. They're going to look for basic ingredients, like they'll look for the spike on the gas chromatography or the liquid chromatography studying, and they might look for adulterants, but they may not. A lot of this flies through with fentanyl in it and things like that. No company is testing for human safety or efficacy. No company is testing for DNA damage or tumor propagation. Nobody has 5 to 20-year data like you should. And all the benefits that are advertised are the same benefits that turn into a bug because they promote cancer growth. So I think probably a little bit more safety work should be done on this stuff. I created these two little AI ads to show you how real they can look and how the influencers may or may not be real. This one, it says, man, who cares about cancer? That's like 5 or 20 years from now. I want to look good now, which is kind of the attitude of a lot of people taking this. Who cares about my 20-year risk profile when I could get muscles and pretty face right now? I don't want you to fall into that basket. Be mindful and know that you have a very long life on this planet. And if you do actually optimize your health, you're going to be here for a while. And why would you want to take something that might kill you off in 10 years? We just don't know. More work needs to be done, in my opinion. Here's another one I made. After I take my Wolverine, I also pop a tart cherry. Dude, I can bench 300 now. That is what we call anecdata. One guy telling you his experience that may or may not be true. And then finally, next. I made this video to show you how good these fake videos are now. This is from Grok, I think, or Gemini, I can't remember. Is it not going to play? Hold on. This video is pretty. I gave it a prompt and it made this thing. I want to say it took it about 8 minutes, maybe less to make it. And it worked when I tested it before today. Oh, that's a bummer. But this guy talks to you and he sounds so real and he's moving real and his mouth moves realistically. And he looks like a real influencer telling you how awesome this stuff is. So just beware of the content you're receiving on the internet. Even be aware of the websites and the COAs. A lot of this stuff is AI generated nowadays. The main source of these products, in fact, the only source is China. If you're told that you're getting it from a legit 503A compounding facility, they are doing it illegally at their own risk. It is banned by the FDA as of 2023, and there were some issues with it before, as I showed you. So there is promise in these things, I will say that. And if they do work as advertised, that would be miraculous. But I have to think that if these things have been around for 34 years and Big Pharma hasn't glommed onto it, like they glommed on to the incretin peptides like GLP-1 and GIP, I'm not sure there's a there. I'm going to keep doing research, and if I find something that changes my mind, I'll be the first to make another talk and correct myself, because that's how science really works. If we find we're wrong, we admit it, and we tell you what we think now, and we give you the data to back it up. Right now, I'm not a believer, and it's illegal for me to even tell you, you should do this with a salad, or like, I can't give you a protocol even, okay? That's my understanding of the law, and I'm sticking to it. Any questions?
Deb said she was glad that you spoke on it. It helped her make her decision.
Somebody said she's glad I gave the talk, Miss Deb, and it helped her make a decision, and I'm happy about that. I just think we don't know what we don't know about the lack of safety data in this world, and it's a little bit scary to me. And interestingly, think about how many friends you have and patients I have that say they don't want to take Mounjaro or Wegovy because they're scared of the side effects. But people are taking this stuff. It's just mind-blowing, the cognitive dissonance in our country.
Brett said thank you.
All right. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, everybody, for signing on. If you have a friend or family member taking peptides, maybe they'll watch this, maybe they won't, but feel free to share it. And hopefully this gives you just another perspective. Now, you still may believe the hype. You still may believe whoever's selling it to you right now. I'm just giving you my perspective.
What actually is a peptide?
A basic question just now, what actually is a peptide? A peptide is a string of amino acids, 2 to 50 generally. So over 50 or 51 or more is considered a protein. It's just a group of amino acids linked together with a covalent peptide bond.
I mean, Brett had asked about the damage, but then he said thank you, so I think you asked. I think there might be some confusion on like, I also use, like they said they use our products, but then they also use a product that has collagen peptides. And so I think that might be collagen peptides are different than what you're talking
Some people are asking about collagen peptides. Now, if the collagen peptides are generally recognized as safe, like let's say that somebody just broke down chicken broth and made a powder out of it, that's different than these novel substances that are synthesized in a lab. So some collagen peptides are really just protein, like a steak, dried up into a powder, or plant protein, like whey, dried up into a powder. That's a little bit of a different bird. The injectable ones that are supposed to increase your own collagen production, like that copper-based one, GHKCU, I think, that is banned and illegal.
Essential aminos, those are safe.
Essential amino acids, we're not talking about amino acids. Anytime you eat a steak or a piece of chicken, you're eating amino acids. That is in the food supply. That is normal. So yes, you can take anything that's generally recognized as safe by the FDA. If you're worried about something, go look it up on the FDA website. They'll tell you if it's banned or not. I'm talking about novel synthesized strings of amino acids put together in a lab that are injected, okay, and sometimes taken orally. All right, hopefully that was good information. Sorry about the video. I was very excited to show you that, about how realistic everything is nowadays. Well, just go online. Half of your Instagram reels are going to be fake. I'll probably get in trouble for saying that. That was a joke. Don't come after me, Facebook.
Considering your marketing. All right, wrap it up.
All right, we're done. Everybody go enjoy your day.